Peace and blessings, family. Peace and blessings. Thank you all for tuning in. This is your brother Sean Ali here, Supreme Health and Wellness by Sean Ali. Family, I thank you all for tuning in. I pray that these brief words find you and your family and your loved ones in the best of your health, in the best of your wellness, in the best of your life. And I pray that it is on purpose because life is on purpose. And when we are living and leading a purposeful life, we are truly living and leading a blessed life, right? And listen, I have some good news, family. Bam! The God Factory, your brain, neuroscience for the mind of God in us. And that's my topic. I wanted to come and talk about brain games, right? And how we can activate, in some cases, enhance, in other cases, our brain power. Because they will have us to believe that we only use 10% of our brain power. And this could only be true if we don't know our brain power because we can only do what we know and we are only limited by our scope of knowledge, right? So we want to go into some brain games and we can look at how mm, I can activate and enhance my brain power, right? So we can start with the basic anatomy of our brain because this is our knowledge of self. So when we can know ourselves, we can move ourselves, right? So of course we had looking at the structure of the brain. We have the frontal lobe, which is responsible for our thinking. And right here would be what is called the central sulcus. And this divides the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe, which is our sensory neurons. Then in the back, we have our occipital, which deals with our visuals. On the sides, we have our temporal. If we open up the brain and we go into the insula. This is the fifth lobe, right? We go inside. This is the diencephalon. Of course, we have the brainstem, right? So when we're looking at the anatomy of the brain, this is the beginning of us how we can use this brain and exercise this brain. Now, they teach us that the right hemisphere of the brain is responsible for the creative side, and the left hemisphere of the brain is responsible more for the logic side. Now, when we look at how we move ourselves and how we are made of it, or we are made, the right hemisphere controls the left side, our movement and our feeling. The left hemisphere controls the right side, our movement and our feeling. Now, we can get stuck because they will have us believe that we are either right handed or that we are left handed. And this will cause us to become one hemisphere dominant over the other instead of being able to use both hemispheres simultaneously or equally, right? So part of the brain games is one, understanding the anatomy and the physiology, the parts and the function of those parts, but then we get to practice those the function of those parts. So if I know that this hemisphere controls the left side and this hemisphere controls the right side, but I'm just one hemisphere dominant. So I begin to practice. I was raised to believe that I was right handed. So for a large portion of my life, I only used predominantly, this was my lead hand. When I go to right, when I go to throw a ball, when I go to bat, everything that I did, I was leading with my right side of my body. So this means that I'm only activating the left hemisphere of my brain predominantly. So how do I even that out? How do I activate the right hemisphere? I practice. So the same way I can write my name with my right hand, I should be able to write it just as good with my non-dominant or my left hand, right? So I eliminate that non-dominant side. I eliminate that side that may be weaker because when I don't use this one side, I can't throw the ball the same way. I can't swing. I can't move. I don't have as much power in this side as I do with this side. This makes me uneven. This creates a natural imbalance in me. So now when they say we only use 10% of our brain, this is has to be a part of it because I'm only weakening myself. So a part of enhancing and activating the brain is I need to practice, right? Activating both hemispheres of my brain. And when I do it one at a time, now I do it simultaneously, right? So I do those unilateral or bilateral movements that allow me to move both hands at the same time. This causes me to activate both hemispheres at the same time. I enhance that power, right? I open up my brain power, which opens up my cognitive abilities. So this is a small way where we can enhance our brain, our cognitive, our mental, even our emotional, because all of that is inside of the brain, right? So another way is when we are looking at what the brain needs. The brain requires oxygen and it requires glucose more than any other part in our body, right? So when we are looking, one of the things we want to make sure we are doing, we are feeding the brain the material that it needs to function because it is our thoughts that uses the brain, right? So, and it is our thoughts that puts the brain that tells the brain what to tell the body to do. So, but the brain is matter. When we give the brain what it needs, it's able to do its job in a proficient and an efficient manner, just like any other part of our body, right? So, oxygen, glucose are the two main foods that the brain needs. They say about 20% of every breath that we take goes to the brain. When we're looking at that blood supply, that aortic trunk that comes out of the heart that feeds the blood to the body, the main chute is going right up to the brain, right? So we want to make sure that we are breathing properly, right? Improper breathing causes a malfunction in the brain. When you too many breaths, right? Mouth breathing, chest breathing, shallow breathing. These all affect our cognitive abilities, the ability for the brain to produce that energy and that frequency that moves the body and keeps the body alive. We can breathe wrong and pass out, hyperventilate. So when we are looking at the breath works, this is important not just to the health of the brain, but in order for us to use the brain. One of the parts of the brain that we can see this at, right? We have the 10th cranial nerve, right? This is the vagus nerve. Vagus means it's Latin. It means to wander because it goes from the brain, and this is the spine, right? So when we are looking, it goes from the brain, the where it's at in the brain, to all the way down to the reproductive, and it's getting the digestive, the heart. It touches all of these organs, and when it's innervated, when we innervate the vagus nerve, it allows us to control, or it controls and calms all of these organs. So if we have a racy heart, if we had that nervousness and the butterflies in the stomach, so to speak. If the reproductive system is activated, what we call being horny and things like that. We become sexually activated and we want to control that. The vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, extends right here from the brainstem. Look, the vagus nerves are right here. It extends from the brainstem to the heart, the digestive system, and all to the reproductive system. And when it's innervated, it calms these. It puts us into the parasympathetic nervous system switch of rest and digest, and it brings them all under our control. It calms them into a soothing effect. So the vagus nerve is innervated through our breathing. Listen, when we nasal breathe, when we inhale or particularly exhale through our nose, we innervate the vagus nerve, and this allows us to have control over the body. So when we're looking at, and I'm saying this because I'm giving a general view of how breathing properly not only allows the brain to be fed, it's one of its main fuels, which is oxygen, but it also stimulates and innervates different parts of the brain by breathing properly. And it allows us to have control over our bodies just by breathing properly. So, and moving along, because I just wanted to give an overview and going into something that we will be discussing in future topics because this is our control center. The more we know about this, the more we can use it. The more we use it, the better our physical body and our life will be. Because this is, if we stop moving, right, the rest of the body doesn't move. So if you stop moving right now, the only thing that would be moving is what's being activated by the medulla oblongata, which is our cardiovascular system. So the brainstem, the reptilian part of the brain, the basic part of the brain, where the bodily functions are regulated. This is, if you stop moving, the only thing that's moving on our body is the regulated system, right? That we don't necessarily control. We can influence, but we don't control it. Now, all other movement comes from the frontal lobe, the somatic nervous system, right? So when we look at soma means body. This is voluntary muscle movement. These are our voluntary muscles. And when we are looking, this is the frontal lobe, right? So in how the brain is set up, we have two main types of communication. We have efferent and we have efferent and efferent, right? And this is coming to the body, and this is coming from the brain. So this is the two main types of electrical communication we have going into the two main parts of our brain. Like I said, the central sulcus, it separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. When we are looking, and make sure you get your science books and your manuals, right? The motor neurons and the sensory neurons. This is a rendition of, these are where the body parts that the motor neurons control. This is where they are at on the brain. So we're looking, our mouth going up into our face. This is our hands, midsection, our knees, and our legs and toes. These, we know where it's mapped at. This is where the motor neurons are in the brain that controls these different body parts. Now, the efferent, the incoming signals from the body, the sensory neurons, right, going into the parietal lobe. This is where they are located at. They are almost simultaneously located where the motor neurons are at. The mouth, the face, going all up into the kneecap, the toes, and the only other difference is the genitals have sensory neurons but no motor neurons. So when we are looking at this, right? And that rendition is this is what we are looking at. So this is where the toes were at, going up into the shin, the knee, going up into the trunk and the midsection of the body, the head, and where the tongue and stuff was at. So when we are looking at the efferent, this is what's coming from the body, right? And this is what's coming from the brain. Excuse me. That's from the body and from the brain. So we could do some brain games. This is right. Let's go ahead and practice real quick. Now, our toes are the furthest body parts from the brain. Our toes are the furthest body parts from the brain. Our toes are right here. The neurons that allow us to wiggle our toes are right here. The neurons that allow us to feel information when you stub your toe is right here. So now, if you let's practice real quick. Wiggle, move your toes, wiggle them, right? Just you don't have to do nothing extravagant, just move them, right? This is us because we want to make sure that the body is working properly. Just like when you go to the doctor and they tell you to wiggle your toes, wiggle your hands, and they tap on your body. See, they are testing the efferent and efferent system. They are saying that if you can sense and feel all of these body parts, and they are making sure all of your motor neurons are firing. So we practice and test that on our own to make our body proficient at moving, at being able to move when we want it to move. We get proficient in our sensory neurons so we can discern between I'm sick versus I'm being affected by something that's going on right now and I'm just feeling a momentary reaction. But when we understand that the efferent are coming from the body going up, but the efferent is coming from the body going from the brain going down. The only one that we saw that we don't have a motor neuron on is our genitals, right? So when we are looking, every message that we could get coming from the body, it doesn't matter where it's at, from the stomach, the heart, your anywhere on the body. You also have a corresponding system that will allow you to send a signal there to control it. I'm saying this because we will move ourselves into a position, into a condition, into an environment that it is bombarding us because this is where our five senses are at. So this is where the hearing, right? Sight, touch, taste, smell. So we can be constantly, not can be, we are constantly bombarded by sensory information. Constantly. And if we don't understand how to constantly send signals that will equalize, balance, and then allow us to get control of our body, we can succumb to this sensory information. And now we will be in a state of reaction, a state of stress, a state of fight or flight, instead of being in a state of control, a state of power, a state of action. right? So the purpose of, like I said, this topic is to bring this to our awareness. And in the process, we begin little steps to practice, because once we learn something new, it will always be okay. Well, what do I do with it? Where do I start? Right. So we want to start. Wiggle your toes, right? Go wiggle your foot. Work your way up from your toes, the furthest part from your body, up to your brain, and move every body part in there. You want to make sure your body works. Why? Because if you know you can move your body, see, you reinforce in your own mind the ability that you have to move and influence your body. So now, when you need to go somewhere, when you need to do something, when you need to be something, you know you have the power to move yourself, to be it, to go. Woo, man, that the only thing that could stop you is if you change your mind. Man, right? Because when we look, the motor neurons, the voluntary muscle movements, if you stop moving, your body is going to stay in the position you put it in. It doesn't matter what. See, if you stop moving, your body's going to stay there. Listen, it's going to stay there waiting on you to move it again, because this is a voluntary machine. This is a voluntary machine. But if we don't know the muscle, if we don't know the organ that moves the body, then we will be limited on how we move ourselves, where we move ourselves, when we move ourselves, and into what we move ourselves into. Say, being it is, mind over matter. This is our computer. This is our thought process. This is our center. When we get the knowledge of self of this, it opens the door, because scripture says you are all God's children of the Most High, right? So look what I got: the God Factory, your brain, neuroscience for the mind of God in you. And it's going into how the brain works, a lot of the information, and much more than what I'm talking about here. Look, this is appetite control. See, this is going into the chapter dealing with hunger, and where and how it's produced in the brain, and how we can overcome it, right? And it breaks down the brain so we can have neuroscience for the mind of God in us. So when we want to say be, and it becomes, we can say it and it does it. Woo, see, so like I said, I just wanted to come with a brief um, diagram, synopsis, if you will, going into what we will be discussing in further videos and such, where we will be going into that final frontier, man. We will be going into the brain and going into these brain games so we can learn how to move our body into exactly what we need it to be without it taking all our life to do it. If that makes sense, because this is a wonderful machine right here. This is a wonderful machine. All of the good stuff that we talk about, that diencephalon, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus, this is what they will call the eye. It's not an eye. This is the third ventricle. This is not empty space, but it's filled with cerebral spinal fluid. This is the what looks like the pupil is the thalamus. The hypothalamus is below. Hypo means below. This is the area of the brain that's called the diencephalon, right? This is the master glands that allow our thoughts to be translated into chemicals and electrical energy that's sent through the body, right? So when we are looking at these brain games and what I can do to exercise control over my body, all of the good stuff comes from right here: oxytocin, endorphins, uh, uh, um, you got dopamine, you got all of serotonin, all of the good stuff comes from the brainstem and the diencephalon. When we understand that this is controlled by our thoughts, now we can know how to produce that thought that allows our brain to unleash or unlock these chemical messengers. And now they are released in the body. Woo! you become, you become that. You become that. Because we have something called in psychology, we have something called psychosomatic, right? And psych means mind, and we know soma means body, right? So it is the connection between the mind and the body. And it's going to manifest into one of two things: order or disorder, right? So, and we know that the determining factor is our thoughts and words that we choose to use, because the thoughts are unseen. We express the thoughts with words, right? So the thoughts and the words we use will cause either an order or a disorder, a connection or a disconnection between the mind and the body. And over here, you got words and thoughts like hate, sadness, depression, melancholy, all in those similar type of words. Over here, you got love, peace, happiness, right? Contentment, and all of the relative words that have those same frequencies. But when you think this word, you don't even have to say it. When you produce the thought of any of these frequencies, we automatically produce a disconnection between the mind and the body, and we automatically make the physical body sick. We render ourselves powerless just by producing that type of thought. So, this is going into the power and the importance of the brain in practicing these different exercises that allow us to get control. Because if I don't even know that, a lot of us, we don't even know the psychosomatic connection, right? We don't even understand that these words will cause a disorder between our body. We place ourselves into fight or flight. We place ourselves under the stress response. We create a disconnection, a disorder, where we actually make the physical body weak and sick just by the wrong thought. On the other side of that frequency, we have the high powered thoughts: love, peace, happiness, content, and all of those other equal words. They produce order, they produce that empowerment in the body. They help to strengthen the physical body because these are hormones. See, over here, these all fall under the stress or fight or flight, right? So, and that's cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, right? Those are the three that's coming from the adrenal glands, right on top of the kidneys. Over here, like I said, we got oxytocin, we have serotonin, you got dopamine, right? You got endorphins, right? So You got things that, and these are floating through the bloodstream. This is what makes the disorder so damaging to the body, because even though the body needs cortisol to have a healthy heart and cardiovascular system and strong body, when we are producing it in an abundant supply under the stress hormone or stress response, now it becomes corrosive, it becomes toxic, it becomes damaging to the body, right? The same thing with adrenaline and norepinephrine. When we are producing these in an abundant supply under the stress hormone or stress response, now it becomes toxic. It becomes, it creates or causes an imbalance that now injures us. This is the damage from the stress. Now, over here, oxytocin doesn't damage you. Serotonin, endorphins. These are painkillers. This is the love hormone. This is the reward. This is our mood enhancers. These are those four major hormones that we all know and recognize, right? So when we are looking at these things, these are, this is learned behavior. Because if you stop moving, the body doesn't move. It does what you tell it to do, including the brain, because this is only an organ. Our thoughts, our mind uses the brain. So now when we practice these brain games, I get a thesaurus. I learn antonyms and I learn synonyms. I learn the antonyms, which are the opposite, and I learn the synonyms, which are the equivalent. So I learn the equivalency of all of these words that produce a disorder. Why? So I can learn what words not to use. Now I learn the synonyms of all of these words. Why? So I can broaden my vocabulary and I won't just be stuck with love, peace, and happiness. Right? Enjoy the basic words. I can increase my vocabulary so now I have a larger field to practice controlling my brain, to practice producing order. Mm. This is what, um when we're looking at this topic of brain games, these are some of the things, like I said, in the near future I want to go deeper into. Today I just wanted to give a general perspective on how much or how fun and exciting this topic or this field is. And I'm saying once we get into it and we learn how to control ourselves more and more and more, man, now we learn how to move ourselves efficiently and effectively. Saying being it is, bam. That's what I'm talking about. Now we are living and now we can enjoy though the many aspects of life, including abundant life, because I will know how to produce that thought that produces the action potential, because we know that we are made out of voluntary muscle, right? The voluntary muscle, it moves from contractions. So the muscles contract when they are released, that's the movement. The heart muscles, they contract. When they release, that's your heartbeat. So the contractions are caused by the action potential. This is an electrical spark. This is the electrical spark that causes the muscles to contract. So if you want to move your arm, right, the action potential sends that electrical spark that causes those muscle fibers to contract. When it releases, you are moving your arm. The action potential outside of our heart in our respiratory system, right? The only action potential that's created without us, the involuntary, happens with our cardiovascular system. If you stop moving, there is no action potential. So your muscles aren't contracting. So you're not moving. Now, in order for your body to move, you need a action potential. But when it comes to moving voluntary muscle, the action potential is caused by the thought. Listen, when you stop moving, the only action potentials that's happening is your cardiovascular system, right? Your heart, your respiratory system. Bam. Everything else is waiting for you to send an electrical spark to it to move it. But your spark comes from your thought. So now we are only limited by the thought we produce. Woo! We are only limited by the thought we produce. Look at the graphic on this. See, you're because we control this. And once we control this, we control this. I teach you how to control this. Man, the God Factory, your brain, neuroscience for the mind of God in you. Available on Amazon, or you can get it directly from us. Family, listen, like I said, I just wanted to give a brief general synopsis of what's coming from Supreme Health and Wellness by your brother Sean Ali. So you can look forward. I hope you do tune in to these fun and exciting classes that will be coming because we're going to show how to take charge of our posts in all temple property and view. So we can walk our posts in a perfect manner, keeping always on the alert. Man, listen, thank you all for tuning in. The book available Amazon.com, or you can get it directly from us. I do believe Amazon might have it on sale right now, so definitely you might want to go and check it out. Listen, thank you all for tuning in. I leave you as I came in some greeting words of peace, of love, and of God. I say Namaste Hotel. Power to the people. Salam alaikum. Peace.